20 years ago, on September 11, 2001, many firefighters, EMTs, police officers, and other first responders put their lives on the line to save victims of the World Trade Center and Pentagon terrorist attacks. Many industrial hygienists and occupational and environmental health and safety professionals recognize the hidden dangers of these search and rescue missions, as well as the hazards of the cleanup process that followed, mobilizing to keep these heroic responders as safe and healthy as possible. These are some of their stories.
I was then with the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, specifically the Hazard Evaluation and Technical Assistance Branch. We serve as a consulting company to the nation for occupational safety and health issues. I remember when the World Trade Centers first collapsed. So NIOSH had a team from the HETAB on the ground on day 2. And it was decided at that point that we needed to support the activities at the World Trade Center. So we sent our first team in to actually conduct a lot of exposure monitoring. It was a team, I think, of about 10 the first time. I was on the second team about 9 to 10 days later. We had 2 medical officers and another complement of health physicists, lab, field technician, and the rest were industrial hygienists. And again, our task was to monitor the rescue workers at ground zero. So we were actually at a hotel offsite, but we deployed from a small school very within a walk of ground zero. And we spent the next 9 days sampling for everything you can imagine. Silica, asbestos, carbon monoxide, just an array of different things.
I was involved with the United States Public Health Service under contract, the Region 3. When the disaster struck, I was working on a contract in West Virginia, and they asked me to come up to New York immediately. So we drove there 8 hours, and we got there and we started to help the people in the federal building downtown, FBI people who were coming in, who were undercover, to get ready and fit test them and make sure they were clean shaven and everything else. And also to develop a program to make sure that they were accountable when they were going in and out of the site. We worked on that site for several days, and then it was transitioned to the Fresh Kills landfill, which was the site to sift through all the debris, the remains, and then collect all those remains. During my tenure there over the next several months, I was basically making sure that not only law enforcement was there, it was Secret Service, FBI, and New York Police Department, but to make sure that they were wearing respirators, they were fit tested, they were wearing the protective clothing.
Recovery effort is where I got involved, working with the New York Metropolitan Transportation Authority, the MTA, in restoring the services of the subway number 1 and 9 lines that were damaged, destroyed as a result of 9/11.
Understand that when we deployed, much was unknown at the time. One of the examples of the unknowns was, as later on when it transitioned to recovery, we would see backhoes that would dig through the pile, and you'd see different colors of flames come out. That was indicative of the different types of materials that were burning. So the risks were unknown. We knew that there was a potential for asbestos. We knew that there was potential for dust that we're exposed to. And now bear in mind, we were working on ground zero. We were required to wear a respirator the whole time. We also had bodysuits to help keep the dust from collecting on us.
As first responders, we were called in to initially assess the damage, namely looking at the Cortlandt Street station, which was almost totally destroyed structurally. We had to go in and evaluate what became a confined space. Was it air quality for everybody to be safely occupying the destroyed station? So we would test for the oxygen levels, the carbon monoxide levels, for the H2S levels, other toxic gases. We would also evaluate for the LELs and the explosive atmospheres, the full gamut of what would we normally do for a confined space. And that was within an area that was structurally unstable. And so we had the fire department personnel there and others, as I mentioned, all wearing PPE that included respiratory protection. And we didn't know what filters to use because we really didn't know what kind of contaminants existed down there, because we were the initial team going in, evaluating it and doing the exposure assessment.
Probably one of the most significant hazards for us as people who were actually conducting the sampling was walking on the pile and the uncertainty, the unstable ground that you were dealing with there. For the rescue workers themselves, it was all over the board. We saw heavy machinery, power tools, gasoline powered tools that were being used. And in some instances, they weren't wearing gloves, they weren't wearing eye protection, they weren't wearing respirators. So it was our duty, our job to, try to push and educate them more.
But more importantly is the whole thing is the mental health issues. I was very concerned. It was a very solemn and affair, and it really had an impact. I worked on many emergency response fatalities through federal OSHA as a compliance officer in both Region 1 and Region 6, but the magnitude of mental health issues was more bearing when you're actually up close and personal with all of what's going on a day-to-day basis.
I remember when we first arrived, it was in the middle of the night by plane, and as we were flying over at that time, they'd already had those spotlights that as a tribute, if you will, and a tribute's the wrong word, memorial to the Twin Towers that was going up. I remember flying around and seeing that and just the emotion that you felt doing that. The other two major things were, I remember one of my staff was literally in tears because now they worked on the pile all day long. My job was to make sure they had what they needed to communicate with the New York City Occupational Safety and Health team. So I was now always on the pile. And I remember they were emotional because they were actually observing the rescue workers pulling out body parts. I never had to see that. I'm grateful for that. The other thing I remember was I had been asked from home to bring something back because it was a memorial of what was there. And I remember stating absolutely not. And I was told, well, this is history. And I said, no, you don't understand. There are possibly body parts everywhere that we're not aware of. We did find in one flower pot, for instance, where we were sampling for asbestos, and the result resulted in some type of, I think it was bone fragment. So that was just a reminder to me of the sacredness of this site.
Your police department gave me a little bit of pushback. They didn't believe they needed to wear respirators. And I tried to explain to some of them, some of the sergeants and leadership there, that this debris contained respirable silica, it contained lead, it contained asbestos fibers, which were suspect carcinogens. And I wanted them to know that, just because they were working outdoors did not make any difference whether working indoors, and respirators really, truly were required. So this went on for a little while, and then I passed the chaplain who was walking through the debris piles, and I stopped the chaplain. I said, Father, I need your help. I said, I've been trying to talk to your law enforcement officers from the New York Police Department, and I wanted to make sure they understood that these are hazards that need to be taken care of. And lo and behold, he blew his whistle and stopped the operation immediately. He asked them all to gather around and explain the situation. And from there on, they wore their respirators diligently. They got fit tested, and they did everything I had asked them to do. So I feel that was a great win. But they also then later understood the magnitude of the problem that we're going and being exposed, because there was a lot of debris coming into the piles, I-beams and things. I still had a lot of asbestos in it. And going and sifting through that with the construction equipment was creating quite a bit of dust.
I was so overwhelmed with what I saw that morning, and I realized that I don't remember where I parked my car. And I roamed around looking for my car. When I found it, I also realized that in the moment, left my keys inside the ignition with the doors locked, so I couldn't even get in. And when I asked the uniformed personnel that was around me, NYPD and others, they all said the best option for me is to go to the nearest firehouse, which I did. And I found the firehouse a few blocks away, and there was one fireman, a young fireman who I immediately approached and explained my predicament with the car. And, he looked kind of flushed, and without saying a word, he helped me to open my doors without a key. And I asked him, after thanking him, how affected was his firehouse, and that's when he told me he was the sole survivor and all the others perished the morning of 9/11.